A car rests on a quiet road, engine off, gear in neutral, and somehow begins to climb. A waterfall drops into a dark opening in the rock, and the water seems to vanish from the world. Far above us, beyond the stars we can see, entire galaxies are being pulled towards something enormous, something hidden behind the dust of the Milky Way. Most mysteries are moments. A strange sound in the night, a light in the sky. A story retold until memory and imagination become difficult to separate. But the places in this journey are different. They are fixed points on the map, locations people can visit, measure, photograph, and argue about. Some have been explained by perspective and geology. Some remain difficult to fully account for. Others live between science, folklore, and the human need to find meaning in the unknown. The question is not whether reality has collapsed. The question is more unsettling. If a place can make our senses doubt themselves, how much of the world do we understand only because it behaves as expected? And what happens when, for a moment, it does not? The first sign of instability appears not in a desert or a temple, but among the trees of southern Oregon. The Oregon Vortex sits near Gold Hill, a small tourist site wrapped in forest, slanted boards, old demonstrations, and a feeling that the ground itself has become uncertain. Visitors stand in a tilted structure known as the House of Mystery. Balls appear to roll the wrong way. People seem to change height when they switch positions. A broom may stand at an odd angle, as if gravity has forgotten the rules it follows everywhere else. The careful explanation is that much of the effect comes from perspective. When floors, walls, and trees lean in conflicting directions, the brain searches for a stable horizon and often chooses the wrong one. Our eyes become witnesses that cannot be fully trusted. Yet that explanation does not remove the emotional power of the place. It reveals something more intimate. We do not feel gravity directly as an equation. We feel it through balance, memory, and expectation. When those signals contradict one another, the mind experiences the world as broken. The Oregon Vortex may not be a failure of physics. It may be a failure of perception. But that raises a deeper question. If reality depends on the way the brain assembles it, where does the outside world end and the inner simulation begin? On certain roads around the world, drivers stop their cars, shift into neutral, and watch something quietly impossible unfold. The vehicle appears to roll uphill, slowly at first, then with enough confidence to make even a skeptical passenger lean forward. These places are often called magnetic hills. They can be found in parts of India, Canada, the United Kingdom, and many other countries, each with its own local story. Some say hidden magnetic forces pull metal vehicles against gravity. Others describe underground minerals, strange energy fields, or a landscape with a memory of its own. The more grounded explanation is usually a gravity hill illusion. The surrounding terrain is arranged in such a way that a downward slope looks like an upward one. Without a clear horizon, the eye misreads the road, and the body accepts the mistake as truth. That should make the mystery smaller, but it does not. It makes it more human. A whole road can become a lesson in how easily certainty can be staged by land, light, and angle. The car is not disobeying physics. We are misreading the stage on which physics is performing. Still, the experience lingers. Because when a machine rolls in the wrong direction, the mind feels a primitive unease. It is as if the world has allowed us to see the seam between measurement and belief. Near Santa Cruz, California, redwood trees lean at strange angles inside a small patch of land known as the Mystery Spot. The name sounds playful, almost like a roadside joke from another era. But the experience has unsettled visitors for decades. People stand on tilted floors and feel their bodies pulled sideways. Balls roll across surfaces in ways that seem to challenge common sense. Photographs show guests leaning at impossible angles, smiling nervously, as if amusement and confusion have met in the same instant. Like the Oregon Vortex, the Santa Cruz Mystery Spot is often explained as a carefully preserved environment of tilted architecture and distorted reference points. The structures disrupt the brain's ability to judge vertical and horizontal space. What feels like a local gravitational error may be a conflict between balance and vision. But the importance of the place is not limited to whether the effect is physical or perceptual. It shows that reality, as we experience it, is not raw information. It is interpretation. The brain edits the world constantly, smoothing contradictions before they become conscious. At places like this, the editing becomes visible. The mind buffers. The body hesitates. For a few minutes, the familiar Earth feels slightly unrendered. And once that feeling appears, the next question becomes harder to dismiss. Are there places where the disturbance is not only in us, but around us? In northern Mexico, within the Mapimi Biosphere Reserve, there is a region wrapped in stories of failed radio signals, wandering compasses, and instruments that seem to lose confidence. It is known as the Zone of Silence. The name itself carries weight. It suggests a place where communication thins, where the invisible threads connecting one point to another begin to fray. Over time, the area has attracted scientists, travelers, storytellers, and skeptics, each searching for a different kind of evidence. Some reports describe radio interference and unusual magnetic readings. Others have grown into legend, linking the region to meteorites, strange lights, or unexplained events in the desert. The factual record is uneven, and many of the strongest claims remain difficult to verify. Still, the landscape makes belief feel possible. Open sky, hard earth, distance in every direction. What matters here is the image of a dead zone. In a world built on signals, silence has become more disturbing than noise. A lost radio transmission can feel like more than a technical problem. It feels like separation from the larger pattern. If gravity anomalies make us doubt our senses, electromagnetic stories make us doubt connection itself. And once the signal disappears, the imagination begins to ask what else may be blocked from view. Mount Kailash rises in western Tibet with a form so striking that it seems less like a mountain than a symbol carved into the sky. For Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and followers of Bon, it is sacred. For travelers, it is remote and difficult. For storytellers, it has become one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Unlike other famous peaks, Kailash is not treated simply as an object to conquer. Devotees circumambulate it rather than climb it. Its slopes are associated with spiritual power, cosmic order, and a geography that cannot be reduced to altitude alone. Modern legends sometimes claim that climbers or visitors experience rapid aging near the mountain, or that time itself behaves differently in its shadow. These claims are not established scientific facts. They belong to a wider field of rumor, reverence, and extraordinary interpretation. Yet the power of Kailash does not require the literal acceleration of time. The mountain already alters time in another way. Pilgrims travel for days, sometimes weeks, moving through weather, altitude, exhaustion, and prayer. Human time slows. Ordinary ambition becomes quiet. The self feels smaller. Here the mystery shifts. Perhaps some places do not break physics, but they do break the pace by which people usually live. And when time feels different inside the body, it is easy to wonder whether the mountain is measuring something we cannot. Southeast of Japan, the Pacific opens into a region sometimes called the Dragon's Triangle. Like the Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic, it has gathered stories of vanished ships, strange weather, magnetic disturbances, and a sea that does not always seem willing to explain itself. The area lies near powerful currents, volcanic islands, deep ocean trenches, and one of the most geologically active regions on the planet. Underwater eruptions, sudden storms, and shifting conditions can create dangers that feel sudden and inexplicable to those caught inside them. Some accounts speak of electromagnetic surges or compass anomalies. Others belong more to folklore and maritime memory than to confirmed science. The ocean is especially good at preserving uncertainty. It leaves fewer witnesses, fewer records, and fewer traces. This is where the journey turns. The first anomalies asked whether our senses could be tricked. The next asked whether signals could fail. But places like the Dragon's Triangle suggest a larger possibility. that the Earth itself contains zones where complexity overwhelms understanding. Not because physics stops, but because physics becomes layered, violent, and difficult to observe. A ship vanishes, and a family receives no answer. An instrument fails, and fear fills the silence. The mystery becomes not only scientific, but human. What do we call the unknown when it takes something from us? In the valley of Hessdalen, Norway, lights appear in the night with a patience that makes them difficult to dismiss. They are not one witness's memory or one photograph from long ago. For decades, people have reported luminous orbs, flashes, and hovering forms moving above the landscape. The Hessdalen lights have been studied by researchers using cameras, radar, and instruments designed to separate rumor from pattern. Explanations have included ionized dust, plasma phenomena, combustion processes, atmospheric electricity, and unusual interactions between minerals and the environment. None has fully closed the case. What makes Hessdalen different from many strange light stories is repetition. The lights come back. They appear in a known region under conditions that can sometimes be observed. This gives the mystery a discipline. It becomes not just a tale, but a question with coordinates. To call them rendering errors would be poetic, not scientific. Yet the metaphor captures the feeling. A light forms where no ordinary light source is expected. It glows, moves, changes, and disappears. The night briefly contains an object that behaves like a thought made visible. Hessdalen does not demand belief in anything supernatural. It asks for patience with incomplete knowledge. And in that patience, another door opens. If light itself can remain mysterious in an age of satellites and sensors, what else has not yet been properly seen? Lake Anjikuni sits in the Canadian north, surrounded by a landscape that can make human presence feel temporary. The story most often attached to it is one of sudden absence. An Inuit village found empty, belongings left behind, no clear sign of where the people went. It is a powerful image. Fires gone cold, tools remaining where hands once used them. A settlement erased not by ruins, but by silence. For generations, versions of the story have circulated in books, radio programs, and mystery collections. But here, careful framing matters. The Anjikuni account is disputed, and the evidence behind its most dramatic version is uncertain. Some researchers have questioned whether the disappearance happened as popularly described, or whether fragments of northern history, misunderstanding, and later embellishment fused into one haunting legend. That does not make the story meaningless. It makes it a lesson in how absence becomes narrative. When people vanish from the record, imagination often rushes in to complete the missing page. Sometimes it protects memory. Sometimes it distorts it. In a video about places where reality seems unstable, Anjikuni reminds us that the weakest point may not be gravity or magnetism. It may be the archive. A missing village becomes a mirror, reflecting how deeply we fear the thought of being forgotten without explanation. In Minnesota, the Brule River splits around a mass of volcanic rock. One branch flows onward in the ordinary way. The other drops into a dark opening known as the Devil's Kettle. For years, the question was simple and strange. Where does the water go? Visitors watched part of a river disappear into a hole, and stories grew around the absence. People reportedly tossed objects into the churning opening, expecting them to emerge downstream. When they did not reappear in any obvious way, the legend deepened. More recent investigations have suggested that the water likely rejoins the river underground not far below the falls. Measurements have indicated that the volume of water above and below the site is roughly consistent, reducing the need for a dramatic hidden outlet. The mystery may be more geological than impossible. Still, the Devil's Kettle remains emotionally powerful because it dramatizes a universal fear: disappearance without visible return. We can accept loss more easily when we can trace its path. A river entering darkness feels like evidence of a system beneath the system. The rock does not need to break physics to disturb us. It only needs to hide the continuation. And that hidden continuation prepares us for a final anomaly so large that the scale of Earth itself begins to feel small. Far beyond Minnesota, beyond the Pacific, beyond every mountain and desert in this journey, something immense is pulling at us. Not metaphorically, gravitationally. The Milky Way, along with countless other galaxies, is moving in the direction of a region astronomers call the Great Attractor. It lies hundreds of millions of light-years away, partly obscured by the dense stars and dust of our own galaxy. For years, astronomers could see the motion more clearly than the source. Galaxies were streaming toward an unseen concentration of mass, as if the universe had placed a hand in the dark and drawn matter toward it. Unlike many earthly mysteries, the Great Attractor is not folklore. It belongs to cosmology, observation, redshift, large-scale structure, and the patient mapping of deep space. Scientists have connected it to massive galaxy clusters and larger gravitational flows, but its full context remains difficult to grasp because the universe is not arranged for our convenience. Here, the simulation metaphor becomes most tempting and most dangerous. It is easy to imagine an exit point, a processing center, a hidden engine. Yet the deeper wonder is already real. We are being carried by forces we cannot feel, toward structures we can barely see. The earth beneath our feet feels still, but it is not. Nothing is still. Even our uncertainties are moving. After 10 places, a pattern begins to emerge, but not the simple one we might expect. Some anomalies are optical illusions. Some are geological puzzles. Some are sacred landscapes wrapped in centuries of reverence. Some are stories whose evidence has thinned with time. Some belong to the largest structures in the universe. If there is a lesson here, it is not that physics has failed. It is that human certainty is fragile. We experience the world through instruments, memory, balance, trust, and inherited stories. When any one of those systems falters, reality feels less solid. A tilted room in Oregon and a gravitational flow in deep space have little in common scientifically. Yet they produce a related feeling. They remind us that what we call normal is often a negotiated peace between the world and our understanding of it. Science does not lose its power when mysteries remain. It becomes more necessary. The most honest investigations do not flatten wonder. They give it structure. They separate what can be measured from what can only be imagined, while still admitting that both shape human experience. The danger is not curiosity. The danger is certainty arriving too early. A strange place should not be forced into belief or dismissal before the evidence has been allowed to speak. And sometimes, the evidence speaks softly. There is a reason people travel to these places even after explanations are offered. A gravity hill is still worth visiting when we know it is an illusion. The mystery spot still unsettles the body. The devil's kettle still draws the eye into darkness. Hessdalen still asks observers to look up and wait. Human beings are not built only for answers. We are built for thresholds. Doors, horizons, caves, mountains, vanished roads, lights in the distance. These are the edges where imagination becomes alert and humility becomes possible. For viewers aged enough to have seen technologies rise and disappear, maps redrawn, photographs fade, and once certain ideas revised, these mysteries may carry a particular resonance. The world has always been less fixed than it appears in childhood. Time teaches us that knowledge is not a wall, it is scaffolding. That does not mean every legend is true. It means every mystery reveals something about the people who preserve it. Fear of disappearance, awe before vastness, distrust of appearances, hope that the universe still contains unfinished rooms. The real question may not be whether these places prove a simulation. It may be why that idea feels so compelling now. Perhaps because modern life is already mediated by screens, maps, signals, and code, we have begun to recognize the oldest mystery in a new language. At the beginning, we imagined a world with seams, cars climbing impossible roads, clocks losing rhythm, lights forming in empty valleys, water vanishing into stone, galaxies drawn toward a hidden mass. By the end, The seams have not disappeared. They have changed meaning. Some are tricks of perspective. Some are stories made larger by distance. Some remain open scientific questions. Some are sacred because generations of human beings have carried meaning to them with their footsteps. None requires us to abandon reason. All invite us to hold reason with a little more humility. Reality may not be broken. It may be deeper than our first glance, stranger than our habits, and more dependent on interpretation than we like to admit. The laws of physics do not stop working simply because we are confused, but confusion can mark the boundary where understanding has not yet arrived. So which place feels most difficult to dismiss? The lights over Norway? The silence of Mapimi? The dark mouth of the Devil's Kettle? Or the Great Attractor, pulling whole galaxies through space beyond the reach of ordinary imagination? Perhaps the most enduring mystery is not hidden in a forest, a mountain, or the deep universe. It is the human need to ask why the world sometimes feels like a message we have not learned how to read.